ዘመናዊ ሬድዮ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ዲሲ እዩ ሬድዮ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ዲሲ ቀዳም ብመንገዲ መርበብ ሓበሬታ ኣብ voiceoferitrea.com ወይ እውን ብመንገዲ ዩቲዩብ ተቐማጡ ዋሽንግተን ዲሲን ከባቢያን ከምኡውን ንመላእ ዓለም ይፍኖ ተኸታተልትን ሰማዕትን ሬድዮ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ብመጀመርያ ብኩነታት ጥዕናኹም ምስ ስድራ ቤትኩምን መቕረብኩምን ኣብ ጽቡቕ ንኽትህሉ እንዳተመነና ናይ ሎሚ ቀዳም ሐምሌ 4 ወይ ጁላይ 4 2020 መደብ ሬድዮ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ከም ዝስዕብ ይኸውን ቀዳማይ ዜና ካብ ምጩጥ ከተማና ኣስመራ ኤርትራ ወኪልና ጋዜጠኛ ገረመስቀል ገረዝጊሄር ካልኣይ እርቂ ምሕረትን ሰላምን ዘይባህሪኡ ጉጅለ ወያኔ በፕሮፌሰር ኣስመሮም ለገሰ ካብ ሰነዳት 2018 ክኸውን እዩ ኣመንጎ መደባትና መልክታን ሓበሬታን ኣዘናጋዒ ዝብልናዮም ሙዚቃን ክህልውና እዮም ኣብዚ ናይ ሎም መዓንቲ መደባትና ምሳና ሓቢርኩም ክጸንሑ ሰናይ ምክትታል ክኾነልኩም ብስም ቦድምፂ ኤርትራ ዲሲ ይምነየልኩም ተኸታተሉና ሰናይ ምክትታል
ካብዚ ካብ ዋሽንግተን ዲሲ ሬድዮ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ዝመሓላለፍ ዘሎ መደባትኩም ትከታተሉ ዘለኹም ክቡራት ሰማዕትና በመቀጠል ዜና ካብ ከተማ ኣስመራ ነው
ሰላም ዝኸበርኩም ተኸታተልቲ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ከመይ ቀኒኹም እነሆ ለምውን ካብዚ ካብ ከተማ ኣስመራ ዜና ተፍሒዘልኩም ቀሪበ ኣለኹ ክትከታተሉ ብኽብሪ ኣዕደም ኣብዚ ሰሙን እዚ ተፈላለየ መወሸብ ማእከላት ዞባ ጋሽ ባርካን ዞባ ደቡብን ዞባ ሰሜናዊ ቀይ ባሕርን ኣብ ዝተገብረ ናይ ላቦራቶሪ ምርመራ ብርክት ዝበሉ ሰባት ብሕማም ኮሮና ቫይረስ ተለኺፎም ተረኺቦም በመሰረት ሓበሬታ ሚኒስትሪ ጥዕና ኣብ ዞባ ጋሽ ባርካ ወሸቢ ማእከላት ኣዲባራ 24 ሰባት 10 ሰባት ድማ መወሸቢ ማእከላት ኦም ሓጀር ገርገር ኣብ ገረንሲት ዓሊግድርን ሃይኮታን ተወሺቦም ጽንሑ ብድምር 36 ሰባት ኣብ ዞባ ደቡብ ኣብ መወሸቡ ማእከላት ፎርቶ ሰንዓፈን እንዳገርግስን ድማ 5 ሰባት ኣብ ዞባ ሰሜናዊ ቀይ ባሕርኻ ኣብ ውሽጢ ኣብ መወሸቢ ማእከላት ካሮራ ማህሜትን ናቕፋን 7 ሰባት ብድምር ኣብ ሰሙን እዚ ኣብ ዝተጥረሰ መወሸቢ ማእከላት 48 ሰባት ብሕማም ኮሮና ቫይረስ ተለኺፎም ኣብ ጽዑቕ ሕክምናዊ ክንክን ይርከብለው እዞም ኣብ መወሸቢ ማእከላት ዞባ ጋሽ ባርካን ዞባ ሰሜናዊ ቀይ ባሕርን ዝተረኽቡ 41 ሕሙማት ብምልኦም ካብ ሱዳን ዝኣተው ክኾኑ ከለዉ እዞም ኣብ ዞባ ደቡብ ኣብ መወሸቢ ማእከላት ዝተረኽቡ 5 ግዳያት ሕማም ኮሮና ቫይረስ ድማ ካብ ኢትዮጵያ ዝኣተው እዮም እዚ ከምዚ ኢሉ እንከሎ ካብቶም ኣብ ዞባ ጋሽ ባርካ ኣብ ሆስፒታል ተዓቂቦም ዘብል ክንክን ክግበረሎም ፀንሑ 14 ሰባት ከምኡውን ኣብዚ ኣብ ከተማ ኣስመራ ኣብ ሆስፒታል ተዓቂቦም ሕክምናዊ ክንክን ክግበረሎም ፀንሑ 3 ዜጋታት ብድምር ኣብ ሰሙን እዚ 17 ሰባት ብዝተገብረሎም ምርመራ ካብቲ ቫይረስ ከም ዝሓወዩ ስለተረጋገፀ ነናብ ቤቶም ተፋንዮም ኣለዉ ኣብ ኤርትራ ጠቕላላ ቁፅሪ ብኮሮና ቫይረስ ዝተለኽፉ ዜጋታት ክሳብ ሎሚ 215 ሰባት በፂሕሎም ካብዚኦም 56 ሰባት ብዝተገብረሎም ሕክምናዊ ክንክን ሓውዮም ካብ ሆስፒታል ክፋነው ከለዉ 159 ድማ ኣብ ሆስፒታል ተዓቂቦም ይርከብለው ምንቅስቃስ ህዝቢ ካብ ሓደ ሃገር ናብ ካልእ ተኣጊዱ እኳ እንተሎ ሕጂ እውን ፍኑዋሕ ዜጋታት ካብ ሱዳን ኢትዮጵያ ጅቡትን የመንን ብባሕርን ብመሬትን ገና ቀጻሊ ዘሎ أبزي أب إرترا أتي بسنكي لبدا حمام كورونا فيروس كابو إحنا قابيت جميلو تعاسيو سنحي بس إحنا نهارن مستنهارن كدني مجمار أكاديمية وعمد كل تشعن عسران حدن زي ترفض تمرتي كودونا جدا سلزخونه من قصي إرترا نمرحتا توطي اللهم لازم السرات عملنا إرترا زركبونا عصرت حدا كفل تمارو زي ترفض مدر تمرتي نمزغان بحل صباح سوني شديش تحمله تمرتهم كجمهورية نا كل جات تمارو دما نا زعمت زي ترفض تمرتي نمزغان كابه زمتو سوني صومون مالت عصر سلسة حمله تمرتهم دادم كجمهورية مخانم تنقير اللهم كانوا على سنوات كسر نباتنا كلاين درجة زركبوا تمارو دما مسكراماتن زي مشكل ناوي لوتن أما داتا وحنا سه تمرتهم بمجمار وديهم نبضغطنا كل تشحن عسران حدا أكاديمي عمد كسدادر مخانم تنا مرحبة توسخ حبيرهم أبزي أبيرترا صار من قصيبة بقوان زوجهم لا مكل خال من رحتاتن صار هزيزر أيوزنش جم تحوزارن لبدا كورونا فيروس بالزخون يخون معكني أبزي شغل درجة كان زي بزحي أبنو الشباب معكلا الزكاة بزولو مرمرات في الرقابة الله يخون ندر كلهم تم لبدا كورونا فيروس المكل خال كقبروا حتى انتاغتات كم كرمان كل سنة مخانم لعلوا يحيل الإمام مكل خال حمام كورونا فيروس بتوسخي التحساسيبو أبزوات دوبوب أبزوان زي كرامات لعلي 260 هكتار مريت بزرعة المشفان يصرح اللهم كاب وحسن جميل دما لعل 8 تراكترات محل الصوافرا من حرسات لعل حدث أما بيكر اللهم من دسبو بنو لعل شحن كرتميت كونتال مرس زر صدناي زمن او دخون محرسات زكفافه لقون كله صارت هياين صار بالعن مداني في القراب دما امد لو كم زركب توصات جليسوم ارزو دروب زاقيت لعل 10 تشي هكتار مريت بناي ازمر زرعتي فشافين اللهم بخلو دما الزوبا جلحلو من حدار كبابي بعد زركبوا حرسوت أستاذ كلتا شحن زقلنا تزحرس مريتهم كابي ربا رجالي نزي نصر واحد بلاي عود فرحاتي صرح الله كموتي فدما داتنا بحرشة ومريتهم ذاته وحد زر ومشلا الدرجة نبقى بس يحلهم حرسوت من حدار كبابي بعد سالاتي كابي قبطات كبسا زورد وحج ربا رجالي أبعمد كاب كلتا كساب سلسة جزية مرتكن بحسو يفلتيو لقد سلطان ايزي بحلفة قنيات تعبوت هدرات دركب إيرتراويان بمقنيات 10 سنة محل سنوات إيرترا أبزكادو لا يزخري مدب نتي من قصة إيرترا من 6 سنوات ورحوي زو دبس حدث زوعل يغسل الله لازم السبت أب 10 سنة كتمات سويسرلاند دركب إيرتراويان بعد 8 دولار من أبي 6 سوات أبركيتام زي كازي أتم زي قطات بمن قصة من سنة ليو 20 شوعات أزين صدمات سدرا سوات نغلق عمد كنابي ومحلا في الناس كم زوصدو كابي إحساس إمباسي إرترا سويسرلاند زبطحنا حبريتا بتوسخ أفليتو تحلف قدامة الزغرب الخكون زينا أبي هولاند كايرو إسرائيل أو أستراليان نيوزيلاند زركوب زيغاتات بمخنيات 10 سنة مع السنة تفزكايد والزخري شعون إسرائيل كل شحن 955 دولار على السفر بعد شحن 957 يورو أبي من باي سدرا سنة تفكوعل عبر كيتاميام أبناء الصباح دبار وكبابي ابن سليم يعني 207 كل التنشيح متر كيب ماي تحز كتيرنا صنعة الدقة أمززام قصابة حام دقة ابن سليم كبابيان بموهات بروجكتات صعدها اللون هادسات حيثات مكل خال إيرتران كنزل لقينا أبتي كبابين الزكاة ذو الحرشاوي لمعادن المصفحن كالرب 7 فريتن كتقلقليان أبتي صراح حزبتي كبابي لعل مورالا واحد ذاتي قدر من الله نتسرح زكاة ترزل وحلف يقلصوا كذب وبنو بسنكي واحد حسابايتاو ماي كل معود صنحونا يحرش مريتهم دقوبوت ذا المعلوبايتات تفكر لهم كنزل لحديرام نتسلم كابتنا دبارضا مشانخ دوبا ومعراب أساس 6 كيلومتر حيرات تركب عباي عديام أبي كله هنسا توزينا بالماسة 6 كيلومتر ترجع كرن أفعبت بكوبانا هنسا سجنن هادسات حيثات مكل خالن بحاجز ماشين ارتاتي النزالون دروقات 900 تويت كابه هنسا تتزازيمو حجي تاريفو زلون أم نظام زركب الجن تسدفين الصنح مسرب وحد زخونا بين ذات مسراق مخانو كابه كوبانا هنسا سجن مسمر كرن أفعبت زبط عن حبريتا بتوسخي جليسو ኣብ ዝተፈላለዩ ከተማታት ኢጣልያ ዝርከባ ኤርትራውያን ውዳቤታት ማለት ውዳቤታት ህዝባዊ ግንባር ንዲሞክራሲን ፍትሕን ሃገራዊ ማሕበር ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ኤርትራ መንእሰያት ህዝባዊ ግንባር ንዲሞክራሲን ፍትሕን ማሕበረ ኮማትን ኮሚቴ ሚድያን ዲፕሎማሲን ኣብ መወዳእታ ናይ ዝሓለፈ ሰሙን ገምጋም ስራሕቶም ከም ዘካየዱ ካብ ኤምባሲ ኤርትራ ኣብ ኢጣልያ ዝተሓና ሓበሬታ ኣፍሊጦም ኣብቲ ዝተካየደ ገምጋም ከም ዝተገልጸ ኤርትራውያን ውዳቤታት ኣብዚ ፅንኩር ክትንቀሳቀሰሉ ኣብ ዘይከኣለሉ እዋን ዘለዎም ናይ ኢንተርኔት ብልጫ ተጠቂሞም ብማንዛዊ ማለት ቨርቹዋል ኣገባብዮም ገምጋም ስርሖም ኣካይዶም እዞም ኤርትራውያን ውዳቤታት ነዚ ኩሉ ፅንኩር ኩነታት ተፃዊሮም ንሃገርን ህዝብን ንምሕዳዝ ዝገብርዎ ዘለው ዝናብ ስራሕ ውፅኢት ሓያል ውዳበ ምዃኑ ድማ ተገሊጹ ኤርትራውያን ውዳቤታት ኣብ ኢጣልያ ማዕከን ኮቪድ-19 ምስሳን ኣብ ርእስቲ ኣቐዲሞም ዘዋፅዎ 335,000 ዩሮ ኣብ ሰሙን እዚ ድማ 44,000 ዩሮ ብምውሳኽ ወፍሪኦም ናብ 379,000 ዩሮ ከባቢሎም ኣለው ዘይካዚ ብምክንያት 10 ሰነ ማዕከን ሕዘ ሰማዕታት ንምስሳን 20,500 ዩሮ ከም ዝወፈዩ እቲ ዝተሓና ሓበሬታ ብተወሳኺ ኣገንዚቦ ሰኣን ተተካየደን እትሓለፍ ትንፋስ ከይትህሉ ዜጋታት ወለንታዊ ደም ክልግሱ ብዝተገብረ ጎስጓስን ኣብ ዜጋታት ብዝሰረፀ ምቕሓትን ሎሚ 80 ሚእታዊ ዝጠለብ ሃገራዊ ባንክ ደም ኤርትራ ካብ ዜጋታት ብዝልገስ ደም ከም ዝረኽቦ ተገሊጹ ኣብዚ ብሰንኪ ለበዳ ኮሮና ቫይረስ ሰብ ከም ድላዩ ከይንቀሳቐስ ኣብ ዝሓየበሉ እዋን ብዙሓት ወለንታውያን ለገስቲ ደም ብገዛእ ርእሶም ተበግሶ ደም ይልግሱ ኣለው መቐፀልታ ናይቲ ኣብ ዝሓለፈ ቅድሚያት ዝተፈላለዩ ዜጋታት ዝለገስዎ ወለንታዊ ልግሲ ደም ኣብዚ ራብዕቲ እውን 86 ከረጢት ደም ዝለገሱ ኣባላት ቤት-ጽሕፈት ምምሕዳርነት ዞባ ገዛባንዳ ኣባላት መንገዲ ኣየር ኤርትራ ከምኡውን ተማሃሮ ማሕበራዊ ስነ ፍልጠት ናቕፋዮም መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ብሓፈሻ ሚኒስትሪ ጥዕና ድማ ብፍላይ ለበዳ ኮሮና ቫይረስ ንምቁፃይን ንምልማትን ኣብ ዝወስድዎ ዘለው ኩሉ መድያዊ ስጉምቲ ሓገዝ ዝውዕል ኣብ ወፃእ ዝርከቡ ዜጋታትና ክልእክዎ ዝፀንሑ ውፍያታት ኣብ ሰሙን እውን ቀፂሉ ኸሚሉ በዚ መሰረት ኣብ ኣውስትራልያ ከተማ ብሪዝበን ዝርከቡ ኤርትራውያን ንኸተ ኮቪድ-19 ምክልኻል 14,870 ዩሮ ማለት ዶላር ኣውስትራልያ ወፊዮም ኣለው ኣቐድም ኣቢሎም ኣብ ዝተፈላለዩ ከተማ ኣውስትራልያ ዝርከቡ ኤርትራውያን ኣብ ምክልኻል ሕማም ኮሮና ቫይረስ ዝውዕል 188,600 ዶላር ኣውስትራልያ ምብርካቶም ዝዝከር እዩ ኣብዚ ኣብ ውሽጢ ሃገር ድማ ዝተፈላለዩ ትካላትን ማሕበራትን በብውዳቤቶም ልዕሊ 580,000 ናቕፋ ከም ዝወፈዩ ካብ ሚኒስትሪ ጥዕና ዝበፅሐ ሓበሬታ ብተወሳኺ ኣፍሊጡ ኣብ መወዳእታ ዝኸበርኩም ተኸታተልቲ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ዝሓለፈ ሰንበት 28 ሰነ ኣብ ከተማ ከረም ኣብ ሰዓታት ድሕሪ ቀትሪ ንልዕሊ 1 ሰዓት ዝዘነበ በረድን ህቡብ ንፋስን ዝተሓወሰ ዝናብ ኣብ ህይወትን ንብረትን ጉድኣት ኣውሪዱ በዚ ድማ ሓደ ቆልዓ ብውሕይ ተወሲዱ ክመውት እንከሎ ኣብ ናይታ ከተማ ሻምብቆታት ረሳሕ ፈሳስን ኣዕኑድ ኤሌክትሪክን ዕንወት ወሪዱ ዘይካዚ ኣብ ንዞባ ማይምነ ኣብ ዓድታት ዳብረን ዓድናላን ከባቢኡን ብዝዘነበ በረድን ንፋስን ዝተሓወሰ ዝናብ ኣብ ልዕሊ በቋልያ ዝራእቲ ከቢድ ሃስያ ኣብ ርእሱ ምውራዱ ሓያል ጥሪቱን ብውሕይ ተወሲደን ከም ዝከር ብዕለት 14/16 ሰነ እውን ኣብ ንሷን ዞባታት ሓልሓል ኣስማትን ቅድሚውን ኣብ ንዞባ ሓጋዝ ብዝሃረመ ህቡብላን በረድን ዝተሓወሰ ዝናብ ኣብ ልዕሊ ትካላት ትምህርትን ሕርሻታትን ጉድኣት ወሪዱ እዩ እምበር ዝኸበርኩም ተኸታተልቲ ድምፂ ኤርትራ ንሎሚ ዝተረለወ ዜና ብዝተፈፂሙሎ ዝመፅእ ቀዳሚ ዘረኽበና ተሓንቀኒ እዩ
You can talk all about statecraft and what needs to be done in terms of building lasting peace using institutions that are going to last forever. Well, my belief is that underneath all that, there's also a question of morality, there's a question of ethics, a question of deep faith. The words arki or Mihret or salam are not part of the Uyari vocabulary. That's why they couldn't make peace. They never have thought in terms of actually making peace or viewing the world through the eyes of the people with whom they are dealing. But my presentation goes more directly into the research I conducted in Eritrea. I was in Eritrea from 1984, when I went to Meda, 1998, again, 88, sorry, again. And then from then, 1991, I went to Eritrea, and for 25 years I've been doing research all that time, including the 3 years of the Wayane War. Each year was spent deeply involved in defending the rights of the victims of war. And so all of that is part of the background that I want to talk about here, because if we are going to make peace, then we'd better understand how we got here. We better understand how much damage was done during the Wayane War. The Wayane War is exceptional. It's not like previous wars in Ethiopia. They did things that nobody else did. They did more cruel, more vicious things than anybody else did. I'll give you some examples. There are many, many examples. Desecrating churches and mosques, actually defiling them by having sexual intercourse with prostitutes in the church and then leaving condoms scattered about in a mosque that I saw in Hajar. Desecrating the graves of Tegadilti. Some of the Tegadilti may have died actually fighting on behalf of Tigray. Yet they go and desecrate the grave. Then, when I was in Basora, I discovered that something had happened during the occupation of Wayane occupied Basora for a couple of years. And at that time, for more than a year, the soldiers were gang raping Muslim Saho women on Basora Mountain on a daily basis. And they were doing it in groups of 7, and they were told not to take their firearms when they go to do this. They'll just carry daggers. And then they would gang rape the women in the presence of their children and their husbands. To me, this was horrendous. Why? I don't remember. A lot of cruelty has been committed by Ethiopians who are fighting wars, but nothing like this has ever been documented, ever. So things happened. By the way, I took Mama Amina, who's the woman who agreed to testify about this, to UNICEF. I took her to Sweden, and she testified before UNICEF. And the wife of Olof Palme, the assassinated president of Sweden, she is the spokesperson of UNICEF. She fell in love with Mama Amina and took her around all over Sweden, heavily draped in warm clothes, because we arrived there in dead winter with Sweden completely covered in snow. So anyway, she spoke out on behalf of women who have been victimized in this fashion. So on. So many instances of cruelties that were committed by Wayane. So who incidentally, when that war was in progress, where was the power, the drive behind that coming from? I don't think it came from all of Tigray. It was part of Tigray that was completely devoted to the idea of reconquering Eritrea. Why reconquering? Because a few decades earlier, Ras Alula was the governor of Eritrea. And Ras Alula, there are people who call themselves the Alula today. Why the Alula? What's the big deal? It is the notion that we governed Eritrea. And just to a certain extent, they expect that is their right, that they are destined to govern Eritrea. So when the opportunity came up to fight the war with Eritrea, they went into it with a passion that was extraordinary. And not all of them shared that passion, by the way. I think Meles Zenawi and his crowd were not all that eager to go to war, and were suspected of being sympathetic to Eritrea, partly because Meles was half Eritrean. And so they threatened him When threatened, he responded by started saying really terrible things about Eritrea and being as violent as they are in order to save his skin, basically. And so this is the deep hostility. I divide Tigray into two, East and West. And East and West are two completely different things in my mind, from my experiences. Western Tigray, Shire especially, is separated from Eritrea by the ምሕረት. So there's no question of friction about the border. There's no fence pushing, as happens on the Agame side all the time. The Agame side, the area they call Golomokheda, is the places where throughout history there has been friction about the border communities, constantly. And the Eritreans arm themselves and fight to maintain their plots of land, their homes and their properties and so on. So something happened on the eastern side of Tigray that has never happened in any other part of Ethiopia. That is the successful winning over of part of the Saho nation called Irob and making them part of Tigray. And this was a campaign that lasted for decades. It was a very calculated job. It started with Asimba, the massacre of the leaders of Europe. You know, the Europe were converted to Catholicism in 1840, before Catholicism saw any other part of Ethiopia, way back. And so for generations they had been educated. They had an educated class, and they wiped out the entire educated class in one go, the Wiyane did. 22 people were killed, among them were PhDs and doctors. The rest of them fled. The rest of the educated Europe fled and took refuge in Sana'a, and I interviewed them in Sana'a, and they've written to me profuse life histories to say how they were driven out of their country. Thereafter, the attempt to win over Europe didn't start with Asimba. It started decades before that, by the ruling house of Agame. They are called Shum Agame. That's the title, their traditional title. Shum Agame and the Irob nobility, if you can call them that, have invented a genealogy that is a common genealogy of the two peoples. That is to say, to show that the Irob and the Agame have a common descent. Irobs are Saho, they don't even speak Tigrinya, but here we are creating a genealogy that says that they are of common descent with the royal house, the quasi-royal house of Agame. So after Asimba, so what happens is they proceed to give Irob everything that they could hope for. I mean, they gave them facilities, they gave them wealth, they built palaces for the villas and palaces for the bishops of Irob and so on. So when we came to have our referendum, an issue arose: would the Irob be allowed to vote? They are Eritreans, like Eritreans everywhere, they should be allowed to vote. Wiyane insisted that there should be no voting booths for the referendum in Irob. And there are many Irobs, fighters and others, who are deeply wounded by the fact that Eritreans in every part of the world, wherever they are, including Ethiopia, were voted in the referendum except the Irob. And that is a wound that really is very difficult for them to forget. And so I suggest that we do a bit of rethinking of our history to see what it is that was done during the war. And if we are going to be able to heal the wounds that were created by the war, then one has to begin to recognize and acknowledge what was done. In other words, there can be no peace unless the two parties are fully willing and fully prepared to acknowledge what it is that they've done. This was done in South Africa. This was done in Rwanda. The two parties in the genocide in Rwanda came together to say, both of us must admit what it is that we have done that is so terrible to the other. And once the admission has taken place, then the peacemaking can go on. But if you are in the business of sweeping history under the rug, covering up all the terrible things that, when I give presentations in conventions like this one, and describe the fact that there was a gang raping of women that took place in Basura, my Ethiopian colleagues simply said, my goodness, you're making all this up. It doesn't happen. Never happened, you know. So if you deny all the things that were done, there's no way that peace can be meaningful to the people who are the victims of that activity. And so if I begin to hear from the Tigrayan side some admission of the terrible things that they did during that war, then perhaps there is room for making peace. Without that, I don't think peace will be real. Forget about whether it will be lasting or not, because lasting or not is a matter of institutions that are created that may facilitate the continued existence of the relationship. But beyond that, there is a matter of trust that has to be created between the two peoples. Why is it that we are so fascinated by Abiy? Because he really starts with the premise that there is something good in human beings, and he goes searching for it, you know, and he finds it. Our response to Abiy was tremendous. It was extraordinary. And so was the Ethiopian response to Isaias. Up to that point, I don't think they ever really thought of Isaias as being in any way a friend. And all of a sudden, there's this profusion of sentiment that's expressed by Ethiopians. Why? Because here's a leader who has bypassed all the shenanigans of the old state and gone ahead and communicated directly to people on a human-to-human, conscious-to-conscious level. And that works. That does amazing things. The structure building can go later. And as far as the structure building is concerned, there are many things that are going to come up as we proceed to improve relations with Ethiopia. One is the question of access to the sea. That is, talk about anything that you want, but if that issue is not resolved, then the Ethiopians will not give us peace. And so access to the sea doesn't mean the same thing to all Ethiopians. As far as Gondar, North Gondar, and Tigray are concerned, the only access to the sea is through Massawa, not through Asab. As far as the rest of Ethiopia is concerned, Asab or Djibouti or Mombasa, they have plenty of choices. Now, so for us to begin to think about access to the sea, it has to be in relation to North Ethiopia and Tigray on the one hand, and the rest of Ethiopia on the other hand. The Tigrayans, so far, I don't think they have made any significant move to say they're going to go along with the proposal that's been made by Dr. Abiy. The fact that Hadbadim is going to be handed over to Eritrea, which was Eritrean to begin with, is something that is not acceptable to many, and there are many that are complaining about that. As far as the armed services are concerned, I heard Dr. Abiy addressing the generals in Ethiopia recently, and he was lecturing them at great length about how to reform the armed forces. And I don't think he'll have any difficulty in persuading them to follow through with the system that he's proposing, and at the same time he's retiring some of them and accusing others of corruption and getting rid of them that way, and so on. One way or another, I think probably Abiy will have his say. But I agree that the armed forces, if that's not entirely under the control of the Prime Minister and the central government, it can be a major source of problems. Currency is going to be another problem. Our currency is not traded. The exchange rate is fixed. Their currency is traded, and it changes day by day. So what currency do we use to trade with each other? That's the question. Do we use dollars? Do we use cryptocurrency? Or do we use something else to do the trading? And so on. So there are many issues like that that has to be re-examined. The most important from my perspective issue that has to be re-examined is the plight of all the villages along the Ethiopia-Eritrea border, which were never part of the Ethiopia-Eritrea Border Commission's research work. The maps that they prepared are maps of the physical environment. Rivers, towns they've included, streams, and so on. But it's a physical map. It's not a map of human geography. They ignored human geography completely. So when I was after the end of the war, I was traveling all around the border area, and I succeeded in mapping out the whole border region and placing all the villages on a map. The president saw that map. Somehow it reached the office of the president, and President Isaias asked who made this map, and they told him Asmerom, and so he said call him up, and so I was summoned and asked to hand over all the maps. He said this is very dangerous because if this falls in the hands of Woyane, they can use this very effectively. And I agreed, so they were kept under lock and key since then until now. And my hope is that I'll go back to working with those maps again to see which villages are actually on which part of the boundary. We don't know that. And so at the time that this happened, Kassai was governor of Zowadobu, and he saw my map and he said, please let me have this map. And so I said, well, with the consent of the office of the president, you can have one. So I gave him one. Because they were traveling along the border, not knowing when they're actually stepping on territory that may actually be in the hands of the Woyane. Very dangerous stuff. So in any case, the plight of all those villages, a lot of villages, two things have happened with regard to the border. On the Tsorona side, a big chunk of territory was taken from Tigray and given to Eritrea. Okay? Besides the town of Tsorona, everything north of the Belasa River was handed over to Ethiopia. That's very damaging for Eritrea, but it was done. On the Gulomachada side in Agame, a big chunk of territory was taken from Tigray and handed over to Eritrea. So I discussed that with Kassai. He said, why don't we trade those two pieces of territory and solve the problem that way? We may be able to do that if there is peace that is actually accomplished. But in the meantime, what was happening was that Woyane was doing a lot of fake research to say that the border was drawn in such a way that it was splitting villages. It was separating churches from their congregations and so on. They produced hundreds of piddly pieces of information to show that the boundary ignored all these important realities. So what was their purpose? Their purpose was to say that the boundary is not valid. So we should renegotiate the boundary. My purpose is not that. My purpose is to see what happened to those people, how many people have lost their land, their wrist on either side, and have settled on the other side of the territory. They are now either Eritreans without their choice or Ethiopians without their choice. And so I think one of the important things for the boundary communities is to consider their right of return, if they wish to return, or to their right to get citizenship in the territory that they have now been assigned to. So there's a lot of important key issues of wrist and of citizenship that is going to be part of the negotiations that will have to be conducted. So I have ad-libbed through my speech without looking at my PowerPoint presentation, so we'll forget it.
ينافقكي ينافقك عدي ينافقك ينافقك عدي ينافقك 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 يترفرح كلكم مساخ ينافقك 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 يترفرح كلكم مساخ ينافقك تعالي سبركو عدم زي سدو ينافقك نافقوتك قدا نعاص ما يزنددو ينافقك ينافقك عدي معاري ينافقك ما أزاخنديو زخيدو نلب سبب عدو خلنا بعودو سكدم وخمسلو نابخندي زيرة زيرة محنك قبل كميرة ينافقك عدي معاري ينافقك يرو معاري ينافقك ينافقك عدي كبرتي ينافقك عدي كبرتي ينافقك يا خا لا رزنان لا عينان فقر خندي لبندم ينافقك ينافقك جنات عديناتي عن هوات هاجري ينافق ناس دعلي ينافقك عدي كبري ينافق ناس دعلي ينافقك 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 يترفرح كلكم مساخ ينافقك تعالي سبركو عدم زي سدو ينافقك نافقوتك قدا نعاص ما يزنددو ينافقك ينافقك عدي معاري ينافقك ما أزاخنديو زخيدو نلب سبب عدو خلنا بعودو سكدم وخمسلو نابخندي زيرة زيرة محنك قبل كميرة ينافقك عدي معاري ينافقك يرو معاري ينافقك ينافقك عدي كبرتي ينافقك عدي كبرتي ينافقك يا خا لا رزنان لا عينان فقر خندي لبندم ينافقك ينافقك جنات عديناتي عند هوات هاجري ينافق ناس دعلي ينافقك عدي كبري ينافق ناس دعلي ينافقك
كبرى سمعتنا بنايلوم معلتي مرباتنا عجيبكم كتكونوا تسفا قبر حتو رئيتو ونقفتا انتلوكم اب voiceoferitrea.voiceoferitrea.com توكسنا اب زمت سمون بخال مربات كساب نراخب دحانقنيو برخ سمون
What